Hey everyone, Lolcohol here. Welcome to the 6th video in this series all about crafting. If you haven't watched the first 5 episodes, be sure to check them out to catch up on where we are now. In this episode, I'm going to be speaking a bit about harvest crafting. Harvest is an amazingly complex system, but I plan on covering some of the more interesting aspects of it. Augment crafts, remove crafts, and replace crafts or remove add crafts. Let's start with augment crafting. Augment is just another way of saying add. Think of augmenting a mod with harvest as an exalted orb that targets mods with specific tags. For example, in my last video, I had an item with 2 suffixes and a prefix. Now I wanted to augment or add a fire suffix, -9 to nearby enemy fire resistance, as well as augment a life prefix. I knew that if I augmented a fire suffix and a life prefix, I was guaranteed to get what I wanted because there are few modifiers with those tags. For life, there's only plus to maximum life, as well as hybrid life as a prefix, and for fire tag suffixes, there's only fire resistance, the mod we already had on the item, and -9 to nearby enemy fire resistance. But the order in which I did this was very important. Let's say I had just randomly decided to augment fire first. What could have happened was this. I probably would have augmented a fire prefix. If we look at the Warlord's mods for helmets, you'll see this mod. % of physical damage from hits taken as fire damage. It has a weight 4 times higher than the -9 to nearby enemy fire resistance suffix that I wanted. If I did this first, it's more than likely that I would have hit this fizz taken as fire mod and been very sad. So what did I do instead? Well, I wanted to first get 3 prefixes, so that if I augmented fire, I'd be guaranteed to hit a suffix. This is where the augment life comes in. Now we're in a similar situation where there's a bad life tagged suffix, flat life regen per second, so I didn't want to augment life. To guarantee that we hit a life prefix when augmenting life, I made sure to bench craft a 3rd suffix first. Now when I went to augment life, it was guaranteed to hit a prefix, and as you saw, I hit flat maximum life. From there, now that I had 2 prefixes, I could craft on a 3rd prefix with the bench, filling up my prefixes, meaning that when I went to augment a fire mod, it was guaranteed to hit a suffix with the fire tag, in which case this was -9 to nearby enemy fire resistance. So, even though augment crafting seems pretty straightforward, it just adds a mod with a certain tag, be sure to pay attention to things like this so you have a higher chance of getting what you want. By the way, the method above where I was crafting on a prefix or suffix to fill up the mod slots is called blocking. I blocked my suffixes and augmented life. I then blocked my prefixes and augmented fire. Another example of blocking a mod is, let's say we have 2 potential modifiers with the same tag. We want one, but not the other. If the crafting bench offers the one that we don't want, we can craft that on the item first, which will guarantee that when we augment a modifier, we hit the other one that we do want. For example, let's pretend that my helmet didn't have fire resistance on it before I augmented a fire mod. Pretend the prefixes were also full and we had 1 suffix. If I didn't block fire resistance first by crafting it on with the crafting bench, there's a high chance I would have augmented on fire resistance instead of getting the -9 to nearby fire resistance. So we would have said that I blocked fire resistance on the crafting bench and then I augmented. Another incredibly useful harvest craft is one that removes a modifier of a specific type and then adds a new modifier with that same tag. For example, remove a random life modifier from an item, add a new life modifier. You also get crafts like remove a random non-life modifier and add a life modifier. These are a bit more complex and have more of a niche use case, so we're going to focus on the former for the time being, the remove, for example, life and add life. So let's have a look at our helmet. It looks a little bit different from the last time you saw it, right? First off, the tier of life is higher. It's now tier 2, whereas before it was tier 7. Also, now it has chaos resistance. How did that happen? Well, the first step was pretty simple. With the Harvest Craft remove a life modifier, add a life modifier, I was able to increase the tier of the life modifier. Now, there was a tiny bit of risk to this, but not much. Nothing that could have bricked the item. When I say brick the item, that means you've completely ruined it and you need to start from the beginning. But what could have happened was I could have hit Hybrid Life Energy Shield, which would have been a bit sad, but if that had happened, I could have just repeated the same craft. Remove life, add life, hoping to then hit flat life again. Some crafted items will have more mods that share tags, in which case this method is much more risky. Imagine you have a sword with tier 1% physical damage, tier 1% hybrid physical damage, and tier 8 flat physical damage. If you were to use remove a physical modifier and add a new physical modifier to try and get tier 1 flat fizz, you'd be risking re-rolling the 2 tier 1 modifiers. So be aware of this. It's not always guaranteed that you'll remove the correct modifier and add it at a higher tier. Generally, remove add crafts are used to increase the tier of a desired mod on an item when there is only one possible outcome. But sometimes there will be some gambling involved, unfortunately. Crafting is not always guaranteed and there is often an element of gambling, but knowing your harvest craft is a way to mitigate that risk and uncertainty. And that chaos resistance? Where did that come from? Harvest has a really cool craft where you can swap your resistances. Something like change a modifier that grants lightning resistance into a similar tier modifier that grants cold resistance. This literally just changes a mod from, for example, tier 1 lightning resistance to tier 1 cold resistance. Very useful for balancing out your resistances. But there's no craft to change fire, cold, or lightning resistance into chaos resistance. So how did I get this? It used to have fire and lightning resistance. Well, there's another kind of craft in Harvest that allows you to remove a mod with a specific tag. We call this targeted annuls because it functions similarly to an orb of annulment, but only targets mods with a specific tag. Again, in some circumstances, you have an item with multiple mods with a specific tag. Let's have a look at this explode chest of mine. It has more than one mod with the tag physical. If I wanted to use remove a random physical modifier on this item, there'd be a chance that I lose the explode mod. So in this case, there would still be a bit of gamble involved. Harvest is much more controlled than what we had previously, but it doesn't always guarantee what we want. But let's get back to our helmet. So I knew I wanted chaos resistance on it, but there's no craft that changes the lightning or fire resistance into a chaos resistance. However, what I could do was this. Firstly, I really didn't need fire resistance on the helmet, but I did want to keep the lightning resistance. So you're probably thinking, well, just use a remove a fire mod. Well, if I did that, there was a chance I could have removed the -9 nearby enemy fire resistance mod by accident, because that also has a fire tag. So what I did first was swap the fire resistance for cold resistance. Now I use the craft remove a random cold modifier from an item, and because cold resistance was the only cold tagged modifier on this helmet, it was guaranteed that I would remove this cold resistance. This left me with an open suffix. So what now? Augment chaos. Again, the only chaos tagged suffix on this helmet is chaos resistance. So by augmenting chaos, I was guaranteed to hit chaos resistance. Even though there's no swap cold for chaos resistance, there are some smart ways to still get what you want. And from there, to get the chaos resistance to tier 2, I just used the remove a random chaos modifier, add a chaos modifier until I was happy. So in summary, hopefully this gives you an idea of how to use augment, remove, as well as remove add crafts in Harvest. Let's just review those again. Augment just adds a new modifier with a specific tag. Just make sure to block unwanted modifiers before using this to give yourself a higher chance of getting what you want. Remove crafts. This is the opposite. It removes a modifier with a specific tag that you do not want on your item. Again, just remember that if your item has 2 modifiers with the same tag, you have a chance of removing either one of them, or if there are more than 2, any of them. So there is a potential gamble involved. Remove add or replace crafts. This removes a modifier with a specific tag and then adds a modifier with that same tag. This is often used as a fancy divine orb that will re-roll the tier of a mod. But before we go, not all tags are covered by Harvest, but many are. I'm going to go through the tags for which Harvest offers augment, remove, and remove add crafts. We have caster, physical, fire, cold, lightning, chaos, attack, defense, life, speed, critical, and influence. I know it seems like a lot, but you will learn these over time. But an even better way of knowing what you can get is to know what you can't get with Harvest. Here are the modifiers you really should know about that Harvest does not offer crafts for. Mana, attributes such as strength, dexterity, and intelligence. Minion, there are no minion tagged Harvest crafts, so there's never going to be anything like augment a minion modifier. That doesn't exist. Also, gem and ailment tagged modifiers are not covered by Harvest, and general damage tag modifiers like damage over time multiplier are not covered by Harvest. But all of the ones above are. Augment caster, remove add caster. Same for physical. Augment physical, remove physical, and remove add physical, and the same for the list that I showed you above. Something else to note is that some modifiers do have multiple tags. So even if we can't remove increased elemental damage with attack skills with the non-existent remove elemental modifier from an item, this mod also has the attack tag, which we can use to remove it if we wanted to. But there's a 4th type of Harvest craft to talk about. Harvest will sometimes offer you a craft like remove a non-cold modifier, add a new cold modifier. These crafts follow the same ones as above: life, caster, physical, fire, lightning, etc. You'll find a variant of this craft for each of those tags. So, even if there is no direct remove craft for mana, we can still always gamble and use something like remove a non-life mod, add a life mod to try and remove mana and add life. This could remove any modifier that doesn't have the life tag, but sometimes it's all we can do. Roll the dice and hope. So this is future Lolcohol, and I wanted to add a use case in which doing a remove non-type to type, as in remove something like a non-cold modifier, add a cold modifier. We had a question in our Discord and Dave answered it in such a clever way. So someone said, looking at this item, I've recreated the item he linked. He said, how can I get rid of this rarity? And my sort of flippant response was, well, tough luck. You can't do that because it has no tags. But Dave said, you can remove it with remove non-defense modifier, add a defense modifier. And now you might be thinking, well, if we do that, we could get rid of this culling strike or dexterity or intelligence. But because there are only prefixes with the defense tag, if we do remove non-defense, add defense, we know that we are going to remove a prefix because for it to be able to add a defense modifier, it has to make space for a new defense modifier. And the only place it can make that space is in the prefixes. So you can see here, this % increased energy shield is a defense modifier, and so is this prefix modifier, hybrid % increased energy shield. These are both defense tagged. So if we do remove non-defense and we know that it has to remove a prefix to make space for a new defense tagged modifier, it will remove this increased rarity of items. So I'm just going to do that. We're going to go remove non-defense, add a defense. We're going to click this. You'll see the rarity go away. There we go. We have added increased energy shield. So thank you, Dave, master of harvest crafting. He should really be making this series because he's so good at this stuff. Anyway, back to the video. As I said at the start of this video, this is quite a complex system with specific use cases, but I wanted to make you aware of it and just show you maybe 1 or 2 examples of where you can use it. There is so much to talk about with harvest crafting. It's the first time we've ever had this level of control with the crafting process. But with that comes the depth of complexity. As we do more crafts together, you'll start to see how these work. But for now, you've been made aware of all of these things, how they work, and some instances in which we can use them. That's going to be it for this video. If you have any questions, please be sure to leave them in the comments below. And be sure to like, subscribe, follow me on Twitch, and join our Discord server. Links for all of those things are in the description below. This is Lolcohol. Have a wonderful day, everyone, and stay safe in Path of Exile and in real life. Bye-bye!
Divine power! Divine power! It's launching exile. You're making me nervous.